Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am absolutely thrilled and very grateful to have a special guest with us today, Dr. David Grand. Dr. Grand is a psychotherapist, a lecturer, performance coach, and humanitarian. He is the author of Brainspotting, the revolutionary new therapy for rapid and effective change. And for those of you who are not yet familiar with Brainspotting, it is an internationally acclaimed method that brings about life-changing breakthroughs with regards to erasing human suffering through healing trauma and enhancing performance and creativity. I am personally trained in that first level of brain spotting training and have already seen some pretty amazing shifts in my own life and in my clients' lives as a result. Dr. Grand is also the co-author of This Is Your Brain on Sports, and his clients include professional athletes, entertainers, business leaders, and survivors of profound trauma to help them realize the kind of personal, professional, and creative breakthroughs that are possible for them. And he'll share some of those things with you today. David has been featured on many different platforms like CNN, NBC, Nightline, cited in the New York Times, the Washington Post, O Magazine, Golf Digest, and Newsday for his success in treating the sports condition called yips, which I'm curious to learn about, and of course, in healing victims of trauma. Welcome, David. It is absolutely a joy to have you with us today.
It's my pleasure to be here, Barry.
Thank you, David. So, would you be willing to share with us what exactly a brain spot or brain spotting is and how you came about developing this modality?
Brain spotting, although it's used for trauma and other emotional situations, is really it's a it's a psychotherapy, but it's beyond the psychotherapy. I call it a neuroexperiential process, which means that it addresses our nervous system, whether how we define it here in the West, or how it's defined in the East, or by more scientific individuals, or more indigenous individuals. There's space in all of the neuroexperiential model of brain spotting for this. And what that means is that we are creatures where things emerge developmentally, things emerge from the deepest parts of us to the more conscious, aware parts of us, and that we can't tell our deeper brain body self what to do. It basically, just like we can't tell it to breathe or to circulate blood, because that's an impossibility, but the deep intuitive knowing that we have, the capacity for adaptation, the capacity for expansion, is something that is there within us, but you can't just tell it what to do. You have to invite it out and then accept whatever comes to you. Now, the brain spotting part, or the brain spot, is an eye position, a relevant eye position. We have multiple ways of determining these and using these. That when you look, we say where you look affects how you feel. When you look in a certain direction and just sort of focus on something, when it feels like there's something there, whether you're getting access to some emotional symptoms, some anxiety or stress, or whether you're getting access just to possibility or expansion, eye positions get access to the deeper brain, to the deeper self. Half of the brain is devoted to vision. The retinas and the optic nerves are made up of neurons. So really, vision and our neurological processes are inseparable, and it's a very direct way of finding where we're holding things deep in our neurobiology. And by once you find it, you continue to gaze there and mindfully observe your internal process. Things will come up that you would not expect, that you wouldn't control, but they are always of value, and sometimes of extreme value.
So, how in the world did you come up with this? Where did it even come from for you?
Well, in 2003, I had already been a therapist for a few decades. And I had been trained in many modalities, starting with psychoanalysis and psychoanalytic psychotherapy, and others that involved body awareness and involved eye movements. And I was working with an ice skater who had worked with me for a year and had been very successful in her regaining her championship abilities, but she was blocked on one jump, which is called a triple loop. And so we, in looking for, and just doing some slow eye movements, when I got just over here, her eye went into this intense wobble. And then if it locked up, and I just instinctively held my finger there. It was almost as if, my wrist was grabbed to hold there, by destiny, so to speak. And in 10 minutes, she processed more than she had in an entire year. And she processed new things that we had never gotten to, new traumas. And she processed traumas that we had worked on before, but they reopened and processed to a deeper level. And it was very dramatic to me, but I didn't really know what had happened. And the next morning, she called me from the skating rink, the practice rink, and said that she had done a triple loop, no problem. And she did it again and again and again. And so to me, the question is, was this a one-off? Was this something that just had to do with this person at this moment in time? Or is this something that has larger implications? And I started to look for these eye anomalies in my other clients. And when I found them, eye blinks, twitches, all kinds of different reflexive responses, I would just guide them, keep on looking at my finger, and we watched for the processing that happened. And it went deeper and deeper, and it was more and more focused. And even though I had been successful prior to this, I saw things happen, and my clients experienced things happening that they hadn't before. And that's when I started to know that this was larger than what I had thought it had been. And really, it's what I had hoped it had been, but it sort of came to fruition as I did it more and more and demonstrated this for other therapists to try it out themselves.
Thank you. And so what does that mean for some of the people listening now, who might be struggling with their own jump, so to speak, in their life, whether it's to speak in public or to be able to take some action that they haven't been able to take, or they've self-sabotaged in some area of their life. What does this mean for them?
Well, I'm going to talk about sports and creative performance and business performance as well. Um, uh, when you're seen as a commodity and not as a human being, not as a creature of development, but when you're seen as a commodity and you're expected to perform as that commodity, it does not invite, expanded performance. It more brings about contraction in the individual. The business world, which is looking to maximize profits, that's the nature of our free enterprise system, actually doesn't understand that by making the individuals, whether it's the top executives or the middle management people or the line people, by making them feel unsafe, you're actually undermining their performance, and you're triggering earlier experiences that they had of not feeling safe going back to early in development. So it's a miracle that corporations and other, national and international endeavors are as successful as they are, although you'll see that corporations underperform all the time. And I believe that just like the top athlete can perform at a higher level, a corporation that's doing well can actually perform at a significantly higher level. We talk about human resources, well, resources come out when a person feels supported. Resources come out when a person feels understood and recognized. When a person feels threatened, when you have an up or out kind of promotion system, it actually undermines performance. So I work with again, people in sports, stage actors, singers, dancers, and corporate executives. And the most important thing is to start to get to their human issues and who they are as an individual, where they come from, their own generational history, the early history down to the intrauterine experience and the birth and the early life, the foundations of who we are. And then to see not only where a person comes from, but where they've been. And each person is different. And each person needs to be received and seen as being different. Eye positions are completely unique. We don't have any map for what you get this by looking over here, or you get that by looking over here. Each person has their own individual map of the moment. So in brain spotting from a performance expansion point of view, first we look to go to the vulnerabilities, to the developmental traumas. Some may seem to be very powerful negative experiences, some may seem to be subtle negative experiences, and help the person to find the eye positions that correlate with these and to literally process them through. And from there, we look to then help the person to expand in terms of the possibility of who they can be and what they can do, no matter what level they're at. And we find eye positions that are portals to expanded possibility.
And as I hear you say these words, what's coming to mind is some experiences that I've had as the receiver of brain spotting through trainings and through working with colleagues, but also in using it with clients. And that portal that you speak about is very real. It's amazing because just by gazing at a particular spot, they access memories that they had not been conscious of for many years or at all. One of my clients, as you said, went into the womb around something to release something. And one of the most profound experiences that I had using it, I just trusted the process, and I noticed some, shaking and, some things that were going on in my body, some breathing shifts, and that did release some energy from my body. And I know that for sure because then my performance in that area that I was working on has completely shifted. My thinking has completely shifted.
Mhm.
So for some people that might be a little skeptical right now, saying, Dr. Grant, this sounds amazing, but it's almost like too good to be true. I mean, could it really be that easy that I look at a spot, right, like for example a spot like this, and that it would reorganize these things in my brain and help me?
Well, first of all, skepticism is appropriate when you hear about something new for the first time. I would much prefer people have doubts than to embrace it with no reason to embrace it. People should be hearing what I'm saying and what you're saying and just be interested in it and hopefully be curious to find out more. But the buy-in, only comes by really having experiences with it, and significant experiences with it. For some people, the change happens, rapidly. Some people have, so many developmental traumas that it takes significantly longer. But each person's map is different, and each person's healing travels are different. I do want to say that there's certain aspects of brain spotting that are rather unique. And one of them is that we have what we call the uncertainty principle. The uncertainty principle, is people who know quantum physics and Heisenberg know that he had his own uncertainty principle. This in brain spotting, it's not the same thing. Well, it's not totally different, but it's based on the fact that the human nervous system has between 1 to 4 quadrillion synaptic connections. 1 quadrillion is a billion multiplied by a million, which is, as far as we could deduce, infinite. That's how complex you are. That's how complex I am. That's how complex every watcher and listener to this podcast is. But what it means is that if you sit in front of another person, you can't possibly know what's going on inside of them. You can look at their eyes, look at their face, see their movements, hear their words, listen to their tonality, and think you pretty much know who this person is and where they're coming from. The uncertainty principle tells us that you can't, and that you have to pretty much start from a blank position and then begin to let the person fill in those blanks, and only fill it in with what you hear from them, not what you think it is. And listen very carefully, and listen to the language, and just and most of all, follow the person wherever they go. We call this for the brain spotting therapist to try to get into the tail of the comet, which is to be following the client wherever they go, and they're in the front and you follow, as opposed to a lot of other models where the therapist or the counselor or the coach is expected to be the expert who knows what's going on, who knows what to do. Well, with the uncertainty principle and 1 to 4 quadrillion synaptic connections, you can't possibly know. It's mathematical, fact. It's scientific fact. So then it's how you sit with a person in that state of uncertainty, and the circumstances that you provide with them that will determine how they process wherever they go, and specifically whatever they're working on.
And this brings even more meaning to that concept of presence, to really being with somebody, very curious from a compassionate, not from a judgmental perspective, really just being with them at any moment, knowing that we don't know. As you said, starting from that place of just being present to whatever shows up, to whatever they choose to express in that safe kind of place. And I know from being trained in brain spotting that presence, that state of dual attunement, is absolutely at the heart. Would you be willing to share a little bit more about what that means for people listening?
Yeah, dual attunement means relational attunement, which is focused and deepened by neurobiological attunement. Now, there are many therapies out there, and many good therapies out there. You tend to have the more relational therapies, and then you tend to have the more technical therapies. And the relational therapies are based on relational attunement. The technical therapies are based on technical attunement, for the most part. But generally speaking, the relational therapies don't have that neurobiological aspect to them. And the technical therapies don't have the relational aspect to it. In brain spotting, not only do we have both, but we view the relationship as the foundation of the attunement process. So there are some great relational therapists out there and talk therapists out there, but they're still not able to get to those parts of the client's neurobiology that have no words and have no language and have no thought. That's where brain spotting is able to bypass this human thinking, speaking, planning brain, and get more to the primal brain, to the intuitive brain, to the body brain. But we do them both together. So in the phase 1 training, one of the first things we teach is that the relationship comes first. The relationship is the foundation. But then in the context of that relational attunement, attuning to the client's neurobiology, helping them to track what they're feeling in their body, helping them to find these relevant eye positions. And there's at least 3 main ways of doing it with many variations off of that. That's the second part of the dual attunement. But it's attuning also, because it's attuning to the person's body and attuning to their visual orienting and their visual reflexes.
So I'm curious now, what is all of this around kind of tuning in and helping people to heal? You talked about some developmental traumas, things that have happened in the past. What does that have to do with performance?
Well, performance is in the performer. We have performance coaches, we have performance experts, but what we don't have enough is performer coaches and performer experts. Remember, the performance is in the performer, and the performer is human. And human meaning complex and unique and fallible and remarkable, all of these different things. So if you're focused on the performance, you're focused on the outside, and you're focused on the outcome. Okay, but that doesn't give the chance for the person to be who they are, and to evolve as they are, and to expand as they are. From a brain spotting point of view, when you help a person to clear out some of the unprocessed traumas in their deep neurobiology, the liberation from that just helps them with how they feel, but also helps them with what they do, which is the cornerstone of performance. It's in the doing. Um, but the idea is, um, uh, if you had an open conversation with the top performers in every field, they would tell you how frustrated they are about the things that they can't do better. Now, when you see a top performer, you just think that they're great and they have everything, and that's that. But because of being human, and because of that everybody has their strengths and everybody has their weaknesses, and the people who have great strengths in some areas have weaknesses in other areas, and some of that is based on negative experiences they've had in their lives, especially growing up. Life in this year, in this decade, is not easy. And yet, if you go back 50 years or 100 years, it was even more challenging. Um, we sort of look away from, ignore, and deny the struggles that we have as human beings, and it's for everybody. I've had the good fortune of working with some incredibly successful people, and when they come into my office, and now I'm working mostly virtually, my virtual office, they're as human and vulnerable as anybody else. Some just immediately go to that space, and some take a while because they're very guarded. Because in order to survive at the level that they're at, and the worlds that they're in, they have to be guarded. But they are as vulnerable and as challenged, and in many cases as wounded as everybody else. So again, when the focus is on performance, the focus is not only away from the performer, but it's away from the vulnerability and even the fallibility of the performer. So performance needs to be seen from the beginning and all the way through in a very human context. And if not, it's like it's like seeing a person not for who they are and where they come from, but seeing the person for what they can do, or even more so, what they can do for me as opposed to for themselves.
And so it really is this massive mind shift if you think about how many of us have been conditioned to look at performance and achievement, and to have a lot more, compassion for ourselves and others, because we are humans and we have histories and we've had experiences and we've made decisions along the way. Now, one of the things that I hear from high performers sometimes when I do presentations on mindset and resilience for CEOs and other key executives is that one of the common beliefs is, I'm not enough or not good enough. But some of them initially don't want to let it go because they say, well, it's created who I am, right? It's driven me to be the achiever. It's my success strategy, so to speak. So what do you have to say to that? Some people that are like, well, it's actually guided me to get to where I am. So
Three,
maybe. Mhm.
three words. It's a myth. Okay. Feeling inadequate, um, being critical of oneself, okay, in a negative way, blocks performance. It doesn't inform and enhance performance, flat out, because the human nervous system, especially the limbic system, which is that mammalian brain, okay, that is set up to pick up danger and respond to potential danger. When the human nervous system and the limbic system feels unsafe, it goes into survival mode. And survival mode is based on speed. The mammal has to run fast, has to fight fast and hard, and so on. Um, uh, and all other performance, goes offline. So when the performer feels unsafe, everything speeds up. This is when you start talking faster or thinking faster and so on, cycling in rush mode. Um, uh, and it can be a subtle version of this, again, feeling I'm not good enough, uh, um, uh, is a subtle way for a person to make themselves feel unsafe. Okay, it's like the actors who feel if I heal from my traumas, I will lose my creativity, as opposed to recognizing that is the traumas that block and inhibit creativity and performance. Um, uh, when the person feels safe, okay, when their nervous system feels safe, the possibility for greater performance is there. Now, there's a difference between challenging yourself and beating yourself up or challenging yourself in an affirmative way. Again, the beating yourself up inhibits performance. The challenging yourself in an affirmative way, such as, you can even you're doing well, you can even do better, and it's not like, well, if you don't do better, there's something wrong with you, but it's you can do better because you have this potential, and even if you don't use this potential, you're still valuable. You're still as valuable as if you do use this potential. But the idea is to push yourself to greater heights and accomplishment in the context of self-affirmation and self-realization, recognizing that it's your worth is not predicated on it or by it.
Thank you. And that shift to looking at it through that lens, can you clarify again, for us, what is the connection between that shift, the ability to really access those higher thoughts of what else is possible, those higher possibilities for creativity and expansion? What do they have to do with trauma? And some of the people listening might be thinking, I haven't had any trauma.
Well, I guess you weren't. I guess you weren't born. The term birth trauma, is there for a reason. Everybody has trauma. You know, this is an incredible world, but it's a traumatizing, a devastating world at the same time. We are vulnerable. We are biologically vulnerable. We are emotionally vulnerable. We are highly sensitive. And if we're really not sensitive, it's for a reason. It's that sensitivity had to be shut down because it was too painful or made a person feel so unsafe. Um, uh, uh, so recognizing that we all have our developmental traumas. Some of us have a lot more, some of us have more, some have somewhat less, but we all have it, means that it puts us in a position to look inward and to look inward in a curious and compassionate sort of way. And by the way, the I positions allow us to look inward to a level that we can't consciously do otherwise. That's really the key to it. It allows us to access places in ourselves, in our deep neurobiology, that are not volitionally accessible otherwise. That's sort of the sum and substance of it. But it also allows us to access further talents and possibility and creativity and uh, um, adaptive abilities as well. So traumas set up barriers in the neurobiology. And as they heal those barriers that end up being blocks that we don't even know about, and sometimes we know about it, those barriers don't need to be there. The system doesn't need to protect itself in the same sort of way. And then the more the system is open, the more it naturally orients towards and explores possibility.
And would you be willing to share with us maybe an example or another example in addition to the figure skater of maybe a leader or an athlete or a performer that maybe had that kind of barrier, if you will, that invisible barrier to their performance, and were able to use brain spotting to release some things for them to perform at an even higher level.
Well, a very well-known actor, and when I say actor, I'm not identifying gender in any sort of direction, came to me, and this actor, who was totally accomplished, had a new venture, a new project, and the actor was just not feeling fully confident in their ability to do it. And we would never know it. Okay, we'd never know it. We think it's fine, but for this actor, it was well short of their possibility. And we did work both on identifying the traumas, and I did, this was like I did a number of 3-hour sessions, so we had a chance to really go deep. And in addition to identifying and doing some processing, some healing on these traumas, we just lowered the threshold of it. It wasn't like they were processed through, didn't have that time. Whatever the blocks, the perceived blocks were in moving into this new project and taking on this new character, we simultaneously worked with accessing, that which was readily available, but was just temporarily blocked. And so many insights came to this actor, not just from in front of the camera, but from even behind the camera, and this person had the prominence to be able to tell the director and the screenwriter, to make certain modifications. And this was actually going into the second season of the project. And going into the second season, the actor felt like they made a breakthrough that they hadn't otherwise. And this again would be one of the people considered at the top of their game, the most successful, the most prominent. But they went to a higher level. How much we would have seen it from the outside is not entirely clear. I'm sure that if you knew, then you might be able to see. But for this person, it was a breakthrough.
Thank you for sharing that. And I imagine words that you often hear are words like I feel free, or I just feel ease, or just liberated. I don't know if you sense that also in your work. I hallucinate that you do. Given
No,
the
that's no hallucination. I do want to say business executives and the higher you go, and this includes attorneys who are in business also, have to make crucial decisions all the time where billions of dollars are on the line. Okay. And it's not all that clear what the right path is and what the less right path is. And the amount of pressure that is there and the consequences are inordinate. Okay. I like to say that life squeezes our lemon. It squeezes, our greatest vulnerabilities. So it brings up the sense of vulnerability and fallibility in an environment that does not tolerate it, where one droplet of sweat is seen as weakness and failure. When a person's metabolism is in homeostasis, is not in dysregulation, but has moved into regulation, not only does breathing and respiration and circulation and digestion and everything just sort of fall into place, but the capacity to perceive also comes into play, and that sense of being threatened gets reduced, and the possibility comes forward. Fear tends to make us speed up, or it can also cause us to slow down too much, not to the point of being, thoughtful and cautious, but to the point of being, you know, frozen. So there's a balance between going too fast or going too slow, and there's that middle range of just sort of the right natural speed by which we make our, we study things and we make our decisions. Um, fear can either rev us up or fear can either shut us down. And decisions that are made, it's either the impulsive decision when the person's system is revved up, or it is the missed opportunity, the inability to act by being shut down or slowed down, that all come back to the nervous system that feels under threat.
And this is so incredibly relevant these days with so much change going on and, executives finding themselves in this place of just immense amount of disruption, accelerated things, not a lot of information to be able to make what they would consider logical, sound decisions, and often do feel paralyzed. Or they revert back to some old ways of being, which kept them safe, but not what won't necessarily help them to survive or thrive in this new environment that they find themselves in. And so, what I see as the connection between brain spotting and performance, not only in terms of releasing those things that are inhibiting their ability to increase their performance, but also to adapt better, more quickly, more easily to change.
Mm-hmm. Change is always there. It's. I like the metaphor of whitewater, kayaking. Okay, you have to be making those decisions in the moment, moment to moment, about how to paddle, how to turn, how to weight yourself, and all of these things. And if you go according to the last rapids, it's not going to work. You have to be in that environment at that time, and you have to be able to adapt in the moment. But if you're trying to control something you can't control, you end up with less control than you might have had otherwise. And again, you have to be in the context of reality. If you have a business and there's supply chain issues that are slowing down the availability of component parts for whatever product you're making, first of all, that's incredibly stressful. You have to realize that you're not the only person in that circumstance, that it's pretty universal right now. But that in that context, okay, there are the more effective adaptive decisions that can be made, or the less adaptive, decisions that can be made. And you have to be able to change in the moment if circumstances really change in the moment. It's just to go back, and now we're having, some issues with certain supplies. But when COVID first broke out, 2 years ago, and then it came to the point when you couldn't get paper towels, you couldn't get toilet paper. Okay. The idea in people's mind, the fear response is, I'm never going to be able to get it. That's why the hoarding came up, and that's why it became not available. And until it was back on the shelves, people assumed it was never going to be back on the shelves. A good business person or a person who understands patterns knows, well, it's a matter of time, and when that happens, it's just not going to be, that won't be the problem anymore. And it goes, in terms of again, the supply chain. Eventually, those microchips are going to be available, or they became available, whatever it is, and you have to be able to adapt. And sometimes it means that your profit is going to drop temporarily, and you have to work within the context of that reality. But if it feels to you like a predator is closing in on you and you're about to be, consumed and annihilated, well, then, you can't make the proper business decisions. You can't adapt.
Yeah. Which is why I'm so grateful for brain spotting, because many leaders are trained in change management principles. I train people on change management principles, and they're wonderful and they're effective. And the reality is that if somebody is not able to see the patterns, not able to access those thoughts and trust their intuition, in order to make those best decisions, highest and best decisions, there is a reason, and there's a brain reasons, and it has to do with something that they're probably not conscious of, which is why it invites this curiosity. And I invite everybody listening to just be curious about how they can be even better, how they can experience even more ease when they make decisions, because there might be something under the hood, so to speak, for them to reorganize, reprogram. And that is so simply done using brain spotting and incredibly effectively. I mean, sometimes within even a 30-minute session, a client will completely have a cognitive shift, a complete reframe in their perception of a problem just by doing brain spotting, by allowing their brain to reorganize any maladaptive stuff, right? And to reorganize those files, so to speak. And I so appreciate that.
Well, I'm going to cite chapter 11 in my book, which is on creativity. Chapter 10 is on sports performance, and 11 is on creativity. And I was working with an incredibly gifted performer who also had written a musical, and his challenge was, who to get to direct it, and all the money people were saying, you have to get a name director and all these things, and he thought that he might be best to direct it, but he was afraid to go in that direction. And we found the decision spot for him, the spot that felt like it had the answers for him, even though he didn't start by having the answers. And he processed on that spot, like for a half an hour, and went through. He wasn't consciously doing it. It was just coming up. It was that deeper intuitive wisdom. And he came to a point where it's just like, it's got to be me, and he knew it. He knew that nobody else was going to understand really what he had put into this, because he wasn't just a writer, or a playwright. He was also a singer, a dancer, and an actor. So he knew certain things about it that a director who wasn't those three, they're all parts of this musical, wouldn't possibly get. So that story is there, and it was and we accessed his intuitive system. I like to say it's really important to know the difference between your instincts and your impulses, because an impulse is something you jump at too soon, too fast. An instinct is something that takes its time, but when it delivers itself, you just know it. It feels right.
Yeah, there is that clarity and that inspiration, that momentum to take an action, even when the action goes against maybe what other people, recommend. But we
Well,
just,
well, let me say this. Um, I'm a playwright myself. Okay. And one of the things is when and playwright, screenwriter, when you write something, you give it to people to read, people you respect, so they can give you notes. Okay. And what I discovered was, I'll call it the 1 out of 10 rule, that if I gave my play to 10 people, 9 out of the 10 things that came back in the notes of that person were things that either wouldn't make it better or would make it worse. Only 1 out of 10 of those things actually would make it better. And I sort of have explored this in different areas of my life. And these were smart people, and their intentions were good. But some of them would literally say, oh, you can't do this, you have to do this. When you hear that absolutism, be very wary of it, because it doesn't leave room for possibility, and for different choices. And this, what I said now, really applies to business as well. So you need that outside information, but you really need to be a critical thinker about it, and someone who ultimately relies on their instincts. We all have instincts. Some people say I'm not intuitive about themselves. Well, they are. They just don't know it. It's like a person who says, "Oh, I never dream." Well, you have to dream. It's you go through sleep stages, and one of them is and more than one of them is dream stages. So it's all there, and brain spotting is a way to access the deep intuitive instinctual system, which is deeply subcortical below the neocortex, and into the mammalian brain, into the reptilian brain, into the even down into the spine, where our survival instincts, reside.
Well, I highly encourage everybody listening or watching to try it out for themselves, as you said, because that's the only way to know. And notice what shifts inside of them, both physiologically. I know this is also used for pain and other physical sensations, as well as for performance or healing. And once we do that, then we can just notice what is different in the way that we perceive something like a challenge, a situation, an issue. Maybe noticing what ideas come to us, right? Our ability to imagine new possibilities that we haven't had access to before, and to feel inspired to expand beyond what we thought was possible for us and for others. So once again, I'm so deeply grateful, David, for following that intuition, right? That in that moment when you held your fingers for that figure skater, and just gave yourself the opportunity to just be curious and then to practice it with others. And what you've done is you've created a really beautiful, simple modality for people to heal. And that is such an important, much needed um, gift to our world. I believe it makes the difference in terms of transforming the trajectory of our world.
Mm-hmm. But when you go into the most complex of systems, you have to have the most simple way to engage it. If you engage complexity with complexity, you're likely to get lost.
Well, once again, thank you. Thank you, David. And how can people learn more about the work that you do? Of course, there are thousands of practitioners around the world trained in brain spotting. I imagine pretty much everywhere in the world. Do you know how many countries it's in now?
Oh, about 100, I'd say.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean every continent, and it's spreading, everywhere, and that's because it's so organic, you know. In addition to my book, my website is brainspotting.com, and it has a lot of information there. There's a YouTube video, what is brain spotting? You'll hear more answers on that. And if you just Google brain spotting, there's a lot of stuff out there. So
Yeah, and again, for people to experience it for themselves, as I did, as my clients have, and it absolutely works. It's very effective. It's very gentle, and at the end of the day, we feel better, and we can make even better choices from a place of freedom and ease, and that's what it's all about.
mhm. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you once again, David.
thank you.